so free to challenge the whip, the gun, the knife, to challenge the fire pulled from the bodies of slaves made into laws, prisons, and courts.
Greetings, good morning, and happy holidays to you all. You know, back in 2019, President Trump pushed some of his top aides to investigate whether or not the United States government could purchase the island of Greenland. Greenland's Ministry of Foreign Affairs, yes, they have a Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Why? Because they're a sovereign entity, said that the island was not for sale. As reported in the Washington Post and other sources, quote, for purposes of national security and freedom throughout the world, the United States of America feels that the ownership and control of Greenland is an absolute necessity, end quote. That was said by President-elect Trump last week. Folks, Greenland is a self-governing country that is part of the Kingdom of Denmark. Denmark is a sovereign country. Now, the Truman administration offered Denmark $100 million to buy Greenland back after World War II. It didn't work then, and it doesn't look like it's going to work now. Why even bring this up? Let's connect some dots and find out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.
Welcome to the Connecting the Dots podcast with Dr. Wilmer Leon, and I am Wilmer Leon. Here's the point. We have a tendency to view current events as though they happen in a vacuum, failing to understand the broader historical context in which most events take place. During each episode, my guests and I have probing, provocative, and in-depth discussions that connect the dots between these events and the broader historic context in which they occur, thus enabling you to better understand and analyze the events that impact the global village in which we live. On today's episode, the issue before us is a piece in the Financial Times from yesterday. The world's leading democracies are struggling to govern. Across the G7, the political center is fracturing, and Donald Trump will make the problems worse. And my guest at the bottom of this hour will be the Du Boisian scholar, Dr. Anthony Monteiro. I know we had scheduled to have Dr. Seyed Mohammed Marandi join us from Tehran. We've had some technical issues, so we're going to have to, we've rescheduled that interview, and we'll bring Dr. Marandi up within another day or two. And I apologize for the technical difficulties, but sometimes when you're streaming live, and especially when you're going as far away as Tehran, you do face some challenges. So, now, before we get to Dr. Monteiro, another thing I wanted to quickly bring up, MSNBC's Joy Reid and Stephanie Rule are reportedly, they've been offered pay cuts to keep their jobs. The shakeup, this can continue at MSNBC as, again, Joy Reid and Stephanie Rule, they've been offered pay cuts. The news network, they've been negotiating to have them reduce their salaries. And this is on the heels of Rachel Maddow taking a $5 million pay cut from her $30 million annual package for her to stay at MSNBC. And this comes as ratings for MSNBC have dropped post-election. There have been record lows since Trump's presidential elections, since his win. You've got Alex Wagner tonight, Inside with Jen Psaki, The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell. All of them have recently hit record lows. And folks, you know, it's all about journalism. It's all about telling the truth. It's not supposed to be about spin. It's not supposed to be about propaganda. It's not supposed to be about Joy Reid's feelings and Joy Reid's opinion. I mean, think about this. She said after the election, Joy Reid, that Vice President Harris ran a flawless campaign. That's laughable. Now, that may be her opinion, and she's entitled to her opinion. And I'm not anti-Joy Reid, but when you make statements as ridiculous as Vice President Harris ran a flawless campaign, I can't just sit here idly and let that go by, because she didn't. In fact, it was reported in the New York Times. Black Harris staffers say they were mistreated on the campaign and blames the campaign leadership for taking the base for granted. The New York Times published a story titled "How Alarmed Harris Staffers Went Rogue to Reach Black and Latino Voters." The story details a clandestine operation by some campaign staffers who ignored directives from the top of the campaign and took matters into their own hands after feeling frustrated by the campaign's lack of sufficient effort to reach voters of color in Philadelphia. You can't have that type of reporting. And if you read that story, it is incredibly telling. And what it tells you is the Harris campaign did not run a flawless campaign. Then just yesterday, you've got Simone Sanders Townsend on Morning Joe. They were talking about Trump saying he wants to buy Greenland, and also talking about taking the Panama Canal. And Simone Sanders Townsend says, "Oh, now I get it. This clarifies Trump's position on Ukraine, with him saying he can work out a peace deal without the Ukrainians in a day. It'll be a conversation between the United States and Russia." And then she goes into talking about sovereignty of Ukraine. And what? Ukraine is not a sovereign state. The United States overthrew the democratically elected government in Ukraine in 2014. Ukraine is a proxy state of the United States. It is a puppet regime. Zelensky doesn't control a damn thing in Ukraine. On that point, Donald Trump was absolutely right. Zelensky will do what, if he wants to stay alive, Zelensky will do whatever the United States tells him to do, whatever his handlers direct him to do. He has no say-so in this. In fact, look at the realities on the ground. The Ukrainian army decimated. The Ukrainian military equipment decimated. They're going into prisons, releasing prisoners and sending prisoners to the front line because they don't have soldiers, trained soldiers. They have press gangs scouring the countryside in Ukraine, capturing men of age and sending those men of age to the front line as cannon fodder. Zelensky has no say-so or control over his country. He does what his puppet masters tell him to do. So for Simone Sanders Townsend to try to equate Donald Trump's statement on Ukraine which is now he can't negotiate the thing in the course of a day. That's BS. But Ukraine's position on this has absolutely nothing to do with the outcome. So for her to take that and equate Trump's ridiculous statements about Greenland and Panama, those two things, do not conflate them, please. Do not connect them, please. One does not give you any insight into the other, is my point. So for individuals to come on and make statements on what are supposed to be national news programs, that's ridiculous. So I just wanted to hit that point really quickly. And before I go to that point, my goodness, no, you did not miss Dr. Marandi. Again, we had some problems connecting with him in Tehran, and we will bring him on in another day or two. Rumination with Andrew, yes, ridiculous. They read teleprompters. Yes, they do. Multi-tom-tom producers write the scripts. Yes, they do. That's a fact as well. It's not only Reed's comments. This is from Rumination. It's not only Reed's comments. It's the entire left-wing media landscape. And that is true as well. And I'm just using, I know Joy Reid. I like Joy Reid, but I also have to tell the truth. And I'm telling the truth here. And so I'm not picking on her. I'm using her as one of the most recent examples of my seeing and hearing the things that I'm seeing and hearing. So with that, let me go to my next point. And good morning to you all, and thank you all so much for joining me. And again, no, you did not miss Dr. Marandi. We had some technical issues, and we'll get that stuff worked out. So as I talked about at the top, President-elect Trump is once again floating this idea of buying the island of Greenland. This is from the Washington Post. The Arctic island, which is roughly 3 times the size of Texas, has a population of about 57,000 people. It's on the North American continent. It's northeast of Canada, but it is in practice a part of Europe and is an autonomous territory. And this is, to me, the real salient issue here. It's in practice a part of Europe. It's an autonomous territory of Denmark, which has ruled over this island for more than 200 years. And Denmark still controls the foreign policy of Greenland. It is a sovereign space. That is what you must take away from this. It is a sovereign space that the U.S. does not control. Trump says that owning Greenland is a national security objective for the United States. And this isn't, again, the first time that he has said this. There is a U.S. military base on the island. Pituffik Space Base is a strategic location for missile defense and space surveillance missions, according to the U.S. Space Force. The base was erected after the Cold War, in the early years after the Cold War. And folks, this expansionist chatter from the soon-to-be head of state of the United States, a dying empire, is very, very dangerous. Guesstimates are that it would cost somewhere around $2 trillion for the United States to buy Greenland from Denmark. But that's a guesstimate because it's really hard to determine a real cost for something that is not for sale. Greenland has been, the foreign minister of Greenland has been very clear every time Donald Trump jumps out there and says this ridiculous chatter about buying Greenland. Now, I have an idea, and you all tell me what you think. I have an idea. Instead of trying to buy Greenland, why not take that $2 trillion and buy clean drinking water in Flint, Michigan? Why not replace lead drinking water pipes across the country, providing not only clean drinking water in Flint, Michigan, but cleaner drinking water in many urban and rural homes across this country? What about universal health care? How about taking some of that $2 trillion and instead of Obama's health insurance reform, why don't you actually invest in universal health care in the United States so that you could actually improve the quality of life for American citizens? How about minimum allotments for a decent standard of living for people in this country? Take some of that $2 trillion and instead of buying Greenland, why don't you invest in making the quality of life for Americans better? How about raising the standard of living in the United States? These are the types of investments in your own country, in your own people, that would actually make the United States more secure. You don't need to spend $2 trillion buying Greenland under the ruse of national security. Here's an idea about how to improve national security. Stop engaging in actions that make the United States less secure. How about that? Don't start nothing, won't be nothing. How about that? You shouldn't have started the fight with Russia over Ukraine. And yes, Simone Sanders Townsend, yes, the United States started that fight. Do the history, study the history. You can go all the way back to 1991 and James Baker talking to Mikhail Gorbachev, promising Gorbachev, if Gorbachev agreed to the reunification of Germany, if he allowed East and West Germany to reunite, that NATO would not move any further eastward towards the then Soviet Union. Start there. Start your study of the history there. And if you understand the history, then you wouldn't be making the statements or thinking the thoughts that Russia invaded Ukraine. That did not happen. So if you're really, really concerned about national security, you don't have to spend $2 trillion trying to buy something that's not for sale. Invest in your own country. Stop trying to provoke a fight with China over Taiwan. In fact, newsflash, you're violating established American foreign policy as it relates to the one China policy. So stop that, and America will become more secure. They reported yesterday that the U.S. lost an F-16, I think it was an F-16, out in the Red Sea due to friendly fire. I don't know about that one, folks. Oh, and by the way, those things are like $50 million a copy. An F-16 is about 50 as equipped for U.S. military service, about $50 million a copy. I don't know if that was friendly fire. They're saying that it took off from a carrier and a destroyer mistook it for another aircraft. I don't know who was manning the radar on that destroyer, but Ansar Allah, they don't have F-16s. The resistance in Yemen, they don't have F-16s. Lebanon, they don't have F-16s. So who did you mistake the aircraft as being? Excuse me. Who did you mistake it for? What did you mistake it for? I don't know, but I think it's more likely that the that Ansar Allah shot that rascal down. Friendly fire, me don't know about that. So if you're really concerned about national security, stop provoking fights and stop engaging in behaviors that make the United States insecure. That's just a suggestion from a political scientist that drinking water, Sherry, thank you. Drinking water in Mississippi. Absolutely right. Not only Flint, Michigan. Why not invest some of that $2 trillion that you want to take and buy Greenland and invest in clean drinking water in Mississippi? Shelley H., Dr. Leon, Black people will benefit from those things, so the empire will not support them. Shelley, you're right. But all Americans will benefit from the things that I mentioned. Remember the adage, when America catches a cold, Black America has the flu. Well, you can flip that. The converse of that will be a rising tide lifts all boats. A rising tide lifts, Reverend Jackson will tell you, a rising tide lifts all boats. So, yeah, I pointed to Flint and I pointed to Mississippi, but we also have to look at the fact that there's gentrification taking place right now in American cities. So we're seeing this trend of urban flight. It's many African Americans and other people of color. It's basically the poor and working class that are being displaced from our cities, as many of our cities, like Washington, D.C., are becoming gentrified. So you fix Flint, you fix the water in Mississippi, you fix the water in Detroit. Well, yeah, Black people will benefit. I don't debate that with you in the least. But everybody in America will benefit from those types of investments. Wasn't Yeltsin the one who had drinking problems? Yes, Boris Yeltsin. I think it was Boris Yeltsin that had serious drinking problems. Yeah, we could start the history lesson. Pittsburgh, dude, 87, after the Bolshevik revolution of 1917. You're absolutely right. But we don't even have to go back that far to 1917. We can go back to 1970. I'm sorry, we can go back to 1990 or 1991. We don't have, you're right. We can go back that far. There's a whole lot of history there. I'm just trying to keep it as succinct and as simple as I possibly can. So again, getting back to buying Greenland, take that $2 trillion, if you in fact have it, and invest in the United States. That's how you make this country more secure. Stop trying to pick fights that you can't win in places that you can't control. United States hasn't won a fight since World War II of any significance. Think about that. We have, over 600 military bases spanning the globe, and we continue to create these power vacuums with regime change and other types of militarism, and we can't bust a grape in a fruit fight We haven't won a conflict since World War II. The Wall Street Journal reports President Trump is openly discussing provocative aspirations for U.S. territorial expansion, not only in Greenland. Now he's talking about taking the Panama Canal. What? Excuse me? What did I just say? He's talking about taking the Panama Canal. How are you going to do that? The idiocy is just amazing to me. Now, he didn't specify how he would take back control of the canal. And by the way, his comments drew an angry rebuke from the Panamanian president, Jose Raul Mulino, and he rejected Trump's threats as an affront to Panamanian sovereignty. There's that word again. Sovereignty. Quote, every square meter of the Panama Canal and its adjacent area belongs to Panama and will continue to be so, Molino responded to Trump's discussion. The sovereignty and independence of our country aren't negotiable. This is what the Panamanian president says. Remember now, in 1989, the United States invaded Panama, captured Manuel Noriega. Jimmy Carter, the U.S. handed control of the canal back to Panama as a result of a 1977 treaty that was signed by Jimmy Carter. Panama gained full control of the Panama Canal in 2000. Folks, what we're looking at here, what we're hearing expressed with these ridiculous statements about buying Greenland and taking control of the Panama Canal, these are the last kicks of a dying mule. And the adage is, the last kicks of a dying mule are the most dangerous. That is something that you really got to pay very, 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 very close attention to, because as the fear of the failing empire grows, the militarism increases, I believe, exponentially. You can put this on a graph and you can see the X and the Y axis crossing as the power of the BRICS increases, U.S. fear increases. U.S. involvement in the Sahel states, in Mali, in Niger, it increases because the United States sees that it's running out of options. So with my saying that, I'd like to connect some dots. I'd like to bring in my next guest. He is a world-renowned Du Boisian scholar. He is the leader of the Saturday Free School in Philadelphia. He's been doing, along with others there, this year of Baldwin. Phenomenal scholar. Wonderful, wonderful man. Let me bring now to the discussion Dr. Anthony Monteiro. Tony, good morning, my dear brother. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Good morning, Will. Good to be with you.
Before we get to this discussion about the piece that's in the Financial Times, I wanted just to quickly get your take on this, what we're seeing play itself out at MSNBC as some of the hosts are having to renegotiate their contracts for lower salaries. millions of dollars at hand as viewership at MSNBC is on the wane. And what this really seems to be is a public reaction and response. People are getting tired of the bullshit. Tony Monteiro.
Well, happy holiday, Will, and to your listeners.
That's a great way to start it, right?
Certainly, MSNBC, and which is the flagship of the ruling elite in terms of the propaganda wars and the ideological struggle. And of course, they lost. They lost the election. And with all of the efforts they put forward, and the Joe Scarboroughs, the Mika Brzezinskis, the Rachel Maddows, the Al Sharptons, just the whole group of them failed. And good. And maybe MSNBC will cease to exist if they can't reorganize and kind of redo their message, and frankly, to show a little more respect for the people that they're supposed to be serving in terms of information. So I'm not shedding any tears over Joe Scarborough and Mika having to renegotiate their $10 million each contracts, or Rachel Maddow with her huge, maybe $20 million a year contract. Let them go. They're failures.
Of the highest order. They are failures, and you meant they are they are the scribes for the elite.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes me to the Financial Times story. The world's leading democracies are struggling to govern. Across the G7, the political center is fracturing, and Donald Trump will make the problems worse. You called this article to my attention yesterday. I'll let you take it, Dr. Anthony Monteiro.
Yeah, I guess Gideon Rockman, the writer of this opinion piece, is right. The question is, can the ruling elites of the white nations, the colonial nations, the major centers of capitalism, the G7, plus their hangers-on like South Korea, can they rule? Now, I think going forward, people like yourself and me and others going into 2025 should have a very measured understanding of where we are in history and what the struggle ahead looks like.
Okay.
And not take everything we read or hear in the mainstream media as truth. For example, with the collapse of the Assad government and state in Syria, the U.S. media, the U.S. elites, Jake Sullivan, the Anthony Blinkens, I can't say the Joe Bidens because he's out of it, and I don't know where Kamala Harris is these days, but they are trying to have a mini triumphalist moment. You remember their big triumphalist moment was in 1991 with the collapse of the Soviet Union, and they were claiming from various circles the end of history, and that the U.S. was now the single superpower, the hegemon,
Mm-hmm.
and history would be made by the United States. Well, they're trying to get one of those moments going again, but a mini triumphalism, and they're talking about what they're going to do to Iran, and that the axis of resistance is weakened, and pretty much as they would like to have it doesn't exist. But they need to convince themselves. When you take their claims about the end of the axis of resistance, which, you know, in the Israeli Zionist worldview could be seen as an end of history, the beginning of the reclaiming by Israel of all of the land belonging to Arabs, which they claim. Well, Israel is weak. It is weaker than it's ever been in its almost 80-year history, not quite 80-year history. It is weak. Its army has been depleted. The society is divided. It looks like it's on the cusp of a civil war. So these U.S. journalists and the CIA and the National Security Advisor and all of these so-called smart people are trying to give themselves a propaganda victory, a victory that they have not won on the ground. And I heard you mentioning about these wild claims that Donald Trump wants to make. Well, let's see if you can do all of that. This is not 2017. This is not 1991. Let's see what you can do. If you think that your tariffs and your sanctions are going to change the course of world history, if you think you can galvanize the American ruling elite and get them out of their anxiety and fear and uncertainty about their future, not only the future of the world, their future as a ruling class, I think you have another thought coming. Nobody's backing down or backing up. The forces of progress are in something of what we might call an offensive. Politically and ideologically, again, I wish to say, the American ruling elite are weaker than they've been in 80 years. 80 years, Will. They are weak. They are uncertain. You read it all over the bourgeois media, where they say in many different ways that we've lost, that we're not where we want to be, that we're losing in Ukraine, that you have a president coming in who is who they are uncertain about, who they cannot rely upon. And I would say to Donald Trump, I think you got a lot of business to handle here in the United States, given that you've appointed people like Tulsi Gabbard and Kash Patel and others who seem to be committed to either paring down or bringing under an all-out assault the deep state. And by that, I mean the intelligence services, the FBI, CIA, and other deep state agencies. I think if he can handle his business here, he will have done something. I think the world is way beyond anything he or the other propagandists of American hegemony can do. I think that's the way I see it. I think we have to be very sober-minded. Will, if I could just say this, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I try to read as much of the bourgeois media and listen to as much of it as I can. And I think, a lot of armchair geostrategists, a lot of armchair so-called anti-imperialists seem to take their cue from what the ruling elite of the United States say. For example, with the collapse of the government and state in Syria, it seems that so many of our geostrategic analysts followed the triumphalism of the ruling elite. In other words, they were celebrating, therefore it must be true, and we must have suffered a strategic setback. I don't think that's the case at all. And I think the struggle continues. I think that the greatest crisis is the domestic crisis, where the US people are saying in poll after poll after poll that the system, the economic and political systems, must be changed or completely overturned, that huge numbers in polling data say they would not be opposed to using violent struggle to change the system. You have this case with this young man, Luigi Maggioni, who killed someone in not quite in broad daylight, but early in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And he has become a folk hero, especially to the youth, where the Christian denominations in the United States have lost the people, and Christianity has become a kind of defining framework of Western civilization. The church loses the people. It, in a certain sense, means that Western civilization and its values have been lost. I think when we look at our situation in this country, what we're looking at is something vastly different than the triumphalism of the narrative of the ruling elite. They are covering up their own sense of failure and defeat and uncertainty.
Can we look at any juxtaposition in terms of Luigi Mangione taking action against a healthcare CEO versus Daniel Penny, who was acquitted of murdering Jordan Neely? Are there dots to be connected there, or am I grasping for straws?
You might be grasping for straws.
Okay.
One, Maggioni was driven by a sense of moral commitment and ideological purpose. We can disagree with him, but there's no question that it was a selfless act, a courageous act, and an act that he considered was morally justified, and which a lot of other people feel so. This other guy who took advantage of a weakened man on a subway and strangled him to death. That is murder. I don't give a damn what a jury says. That was murder. And shame on Donald Trump for inviting this guy to be in his company at the Army-Navy game.
Those are exactly the dots I was looking to connect.
Right.
No, you took it exactly where my question might have been somewhat inartfully framed, but that's why I started with juxtaposition between the two. That's exactly where I was looking to go.
And you know, all of this drama and made-for-TV performances that Donald Trump is conducting. He will learn. And I'm of the opinion that though he won the election, and there's many reasons for that, having to do with the angst and anxiety and sense of loss, sense of purpose of the nation felt by the majority of people. We can talk about that. As you know, I'm in Philadelphia. I can talk more concretely about Philadelphia. But that drama is out of step with the majority of the American people. Or let me put it this way. If it is not the majority, that part of the American population who are more committed to changing the system actively than where Donald Trump is. He ran as a candidate of change, and in some ways it looks like he might be that. In other ways, he looks like he's trying to make a rapprochement with the military, with U.S. imperialism and so on. But time will tell. But the agency is in the hands of the people right now. And they demonstrated this in the last election. In particular, the African American people, and again, I say this on the basis of what I saw and what I'm seeing more and more as the data comes in Philadelphia, the political behavior of ordinary people. And again, I reference these polls. These polls continue to say the same thing. Sometimes they say 65% of the American people feel the country is going in the wrong direction. Sometimes the polls say 80%. But whatever percentages there are, most Americans feel that their country has failed them, and they are not interested in a war initiated and provoked by Israel against Iran. They did not like that genocide and don't like the genocide in Gaza. Now, is it everybody? No, it's not everybody, but it's enough people that don't. I think, Will, I in the free school, we discussed last Saturday this idea of the long struggle against the Holy Roman Empire, from the Middle Ages to the rise of the modern bourgeoisie and of the capitalist system. That struggle, off and on, up and down, went on for about 400 years. The church was not essentially a religious institution. It was an empire. It was a state. Monarchs and governments from throughout Western Europe in particular paid homage to the Vatican because that was the center not just of military power, and the Vatican really didn't have an army after a certain point, but of ideological and civilizational cohesion of the West. I think
all roads lead to Rome.
That's right. That's right. And Will, I think there's an analog to what we're looking at here. The American empire and Washington are the center of this Western empire. If it is undone, Europe cannot stand. After World War II, the European ruling class abdicated power and gave it to Washington. And they act like vassals, and they are essentially that.
Right. And hold that thought, because that point is, to me, incredibly timely to U.S. Navy vets saying the U.S. empire, as you call it, Doc, isn't going anywhere. European companies are all moving to the USA because the CIA made it so by blowing up the cheap pipeline to Germany, which in turn ran the oil to Europe. I think U.S. Navy vet is right, but his thinking is incredibly short term.
Right.
Continue, Dr. Monteiro.
I agree completely with you. These are people who are talking and saying things, and much of their talk is wishful thinking. Yes, part of what the ruling elite recognized, that after 30-some years of neoliberal globalization, of the export of capital, of the deindustrialization of the country, of the bringing down of the American working class, of the creation of generations of impoverished people. After that, they realize, even to hold on to power, that they have to reindustrialize the United States. But it might be too little too late, and the methods that they want to use, such as tariffs and sanctions, to which I say, give me a break, please. I mean, frankly, you got nations out there after seeing all of these sanctions put upon Russia, and then the Russian economy comes out better for all of it. They're saying, well, sanction us.
We're going to turn the ruble into rubble.
Yeah.
Really?
What? Yeah, really? Yeah.
How's that working out for you, Joe?
I think so. So.
Raven Allen, $5 super sticker. The U.S. needs to decrease its military and start making internal and external relationships based on making amends. That's how we stay safe and relevant. You're absolutely right. And Tony, let me just quickly jump back to the Financial Times piece.
Yes.
To substantiate your point. And again, U.S. vet, we're not picking on you, but I think your perspective needs to expand a bit. This piece in the Financial Times, the world's leading democracies are struggling to govern. Consider the political situations in France, Germany, Canada, Japan, and South Korea. And particularly, I think right now, France and Germany, and of those two, Germany, when we look at far-right movements, the people are finally getting disgusted, I believe, with the elite ignoring their realities, allowing the American hegemon to dictate their policies at their expense. They're tired of paying exorbitant amounts to heat their homes with the United States blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. And as an example, Keir Starmer, who came in and many thought was going in Britain, thought was going to be this big move to the left. Now they're throwing stones at him. It's not working, no matter how they try to spin it, Dr. Monteiro.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to that article in the Financial Times, I would add the United States. I think the crises in Europe cannot be disconnected from the political crises in the United States.
Correct.
And, I often say we're looking perhaps at three possible outcomes or ways forward. One, are we on the cusp of a pre-revolutionary situation? That is to say, where the current ruling class either has to concede part of its power or all of its power to a mass movement. This has been the objective of all of the movements since the 1960s and the Great Civil Rights Movement, to alter the relationships of power. And that's what I mean when I say a pre-revolutionary or revolutionary situation. I think we have to consider this in any calculus. The other option is perhaps we're on the cusp of a pre-Civil War situation where, irrespective of the numbers, that the two sides square off and say that we will decide this not by, quote, normal democratic processes, but through arms and other means. And the third, as I've said before, is what Karl Marx and Frederick Engels in the Communist Manifesto referred to as the ruin of all classes, by which they meant the undoing or disintegration of society. I would add another one to the three that I've talked about before, and that is that at the core of much of this is whether Western civilization in its current form can survive the reconfiguration of the human universe, the planet, as it were. Is the civilization of the West going to survive the rise of Asia and Africa, but essentially at this moment, Asia? These are ancient civilizations. Their revolutions, their independence struggles were not fought against modernity as such, but against colonialism and imperialism.
Mm-hmm.
So will a new civilization, new civilizations emerge? What does that mean for Western civilization? What does that mean when the main vessel, the institutional foundations of Western civilizations, as I've mentioned, the church and
Mm-hmm.
Christianity, the universities, the journalists, the intellectuals, suppose the people no longer embrace what they say and what they do as something close to the truth. Suppose they no longer believe that religious institutions, and I think this is the case, express a moral imperative, but are self-serving and money-grubbing. Suppose that is the case. What happens when a civilization has lost the future by losing the youth? And that's why this Luigi Maggione, is so indicative of something going on. And then there's another thing. You know, a year ago, as Richard Haas, the former head of the Council on Foreign Relations, made a statement in an interview in the New York Times, and he said, the main threat to the security of the United States is not China or Russia, or North Korea or Iran. And he went on to say, it is the American people. Let's get our heads around that. This is no guy, small fry. He is a major figure in the major ruling class think tank having to do with foreign policy. And he calculated that the main threat to U.S. security, that is to the U.S. empire, does not come externally, but from inside the United States. And what he was saying in essence, the American people as such are war weary. They are exhausted. And of course, if the American people no longer support the ambitions and strategies of the ruling elite to control the world, if they're no longer willing to go to war to support the hegemonic ambitions of the ruling elite, if they are questioning the values of the ruling elite, we are in a place we have never been before, not only in the United States, but the West itself. This is a huge crisis, and it should not be underestimated, but it must be soberly understood. We can't go from emotional highs and emotional lows, and we lost here, what this means for Iran. No, let us, as citizens of this country, begin to think about the paths forward in this crisis.
And to your point, I think what Richard Haas is talking about when he says the threat is internal,
Yes.
to your point, what he's talking about is the reaction of the American people to continue being squeezed by the elite.
Yes.
As Donald Trump wants to do what? He wants to cut taxes for the wealthy. He wants to cut taxes for the elite. He wants to cut taxes for the industrialist, that class in this country. And at the same time, they're talking about, well, in order to do that, you've got to cut Social Security. In order to do that, you've got to cut Medicare. In order to do that, you have to cut the social safety net that allows people in this country not to live, but merely exist. Yeah. And we're seeing this, I think, play itself out right now. The prequel to this, the prologue to this, is Europe. And going back to your going back to the piece that you mentioned, brought to my attention, the world's leading democracies are struggling to govern. They're talking about the G7. Populism and fiscal problems are feeding on each other and making it harder and harder to govern. France's government was brought down after it tried to cut spending and raise taxes to combat a budget deficit of 6% of the GDP. Folks, populism and fiscal problems are feeding on each other. The French are used to a very nice standard of living in their retirement. They're used to taking the whole month of August off to go on vacation. People in Germany are used to a very nice standard of living. And now they've been told over the last, I'll say 10 years, I'll just pick that number at random, but I don't think I'm too far off. Now they're being told, in order to service the interests of the elite, you all are going to have to take a hit. You're going to have to take a haircut. You're going to have to, your pensions, well, they're not going to go as far. That access to university, that's about to narrow for you. Whoever thought that they'd be selling the access to the Greek ruins in Greece because of neoliberalism and austerity measures? And they're selling us that crap here. Tony, I know I'm ranting, but what say you, Tony Monteiro?
I think in your exegesis, the key word wants to.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is not just what Donald Trump or his administration wants to do, can they do it?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we have a more awakened population now than ever. Let us keep it 100. Donald Trump won because the working class went with Donald Trump. The poor went with Donald Trump. And in a lot of ways, when you say working class, you're saying poor. You're saying people on Social Security and pensions and that type of thing. Well, let's see if you can.
Right.
Let's see. You can talk a lot of smack if you wish to. I'm a follower of boxing. I like boxing. I don't like the crop of boxers in the United States these days. They're too arrogant. But the build-up to a fight is always preceded by a lot of trash talking. Donald Trump is a quintessential trash talker.
He's a marketeer.
Yeah, and he's a great politician, right, by the way.
Right.
I mean, that what was achieved on November 5th is no small thing, believe me. But he talks trash before he doesn't talk trash. But let's see. Let's see. He will destroy the base that voted for him. I see the ruling class, in fact, in the weakest position it has, ever been, frankly, relative to the people of this country. If I am right, the Elon Musk, the Vivek, whatever, and
Vivek Ramaswamy,
and all those people, just keep talking until you don't have anything to talk about, because the people will decide this.
And that's what's playing itself out in Europe.
Well, it's playing itself out here.
Right.
It is playing itself. How much can you take from the people? You understand? There's this economic strategy, a classical economic strategy, supply side economics, where if you make it possible for corporations to invest in the United States rather, let us say, than in South Korea or Vietnam, by giving them tax breaks and all of that. Well, you can't kind of close the circle. These things don't work out the way you think they're going to work out, because the contradictions of the system will not allow it. And I would say first of all, I would say the election, and I know a lot of people say, no. Look at the people.
Mm-hmm.
Most geostrategic analysts, most academics have abandoned the people a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
The American people are backward, they're misogynist, they're racist, they're everything under the sun. I don't agree with that.
Okay.
I don't agree with that. And like I say, I look, and especially Philadelphia, which I know best,
Mm-hmm.
and the data, which we have not gotten all the data in yet. It's like guarding gold in Fort Knox or something. See, as a sociologist, I need the details. I need that granular analysis. But just looking at Philadelphia from what we have so far, it was a disaster for the Democratic Party. Can it be restored? Can the Democrat? And now, you hear him talking about we want to go back to Franklin D. Roosevelt. No, it's too late. Our messaging has to be more towards the working class. No, you're too late. Too little, too late. It might be a spent force. Here in Philadelphia, we have a Democratic Party that is mainly Black, and the leadership is mainly Black, the Black misleadership class. They come out of an election that they lost badly in Philadelphia. What they said they were going to do, they fell short by miles.
Mm-hmm.
They said 630,000 votes would be turned out for Kamala. Well, 547 were turned out, and a lot of the Democratic voters of the past just didn't turn out. Not because of Kamala, and I don't put it on her. It is because they do not trust the political class in Philadelphia. And what do these people do? They don't even they're not even able to understand what hit them. And now they're proposing a Center City arena for the basketball team, for the 76ers, that the people do not want, that the people know they will pay for in property taxes, in higher fees for water and gas and other things. They don't want. But here, these Black misleaders who suffered probably the greatest defeat in the modern history of Philadelphia's Democratic Party, and now they're going forward with something new, a boondoggle. My point is this: keep your eye on the people of this country.
Mm-hmm.
We who are Black understand Black folk. They don't jump when you say jump.
Mm-hmm.
People move at their own velocity, at their own pace. A lot of us are so arrogant because we know a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a real little bit,
Mm-hmm.
although we exaggerate it. We think that when we say jump, the people are supposed to jump. And if they don't, that means they're racist or counter-revolutionary or misogynist. The people are not. I'm convinced of that. And the people will decide. Like you take Donald Trump. Everybody's talking about Donald Trump said this, Donald Trump said that. He wants this, he wants the other. Hey, take a step back. He is performing. The real deal is that he was elected. The Democratic Party as a party was humbled by the masses of people, in particular working people. I don't know how you look at it any other way. Did that mean the people, was this election a demonstration of the counter-revolutionary essence of the American people? The counter-revolutionary essence or passivity of Black folk? I don't think so.
There's a New York Times piece, the Democratic brand is in the toilet. Four writers dive deep into the party's distress. And Liz Smith says the brand is in the toilet. Many of the Democrats who succeeded this cycle, our best overperformers in the House, for instance, are people who ran against the party brand. Tim Ryan, the Dems got pinned as the status quo party on inflation, instability, insecurity, and every other issue facing working people. They had no message that could resonate with the working class, and beyond message, they had no policy. Go ahead, Tony.
You see, I think that kind of avoids the real issue before us. You see, the Democratic Party is not the Franklin Roosevelt Party or the Lyndon Johnson Party.
No, thank you, Bill Clinton and the Democratic Legislative Council, moving the whole kit and caboodle to the right.
Yes.
So you're explaining the why behind what I said in terms of messaging and no policy. You're now explaining the why there is no message and the why they have no policy and why they ran from their base.
Well, was it their base any longer?
No. I mean historically and stereotypically. No.
Yeah,
you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. I think they ran the only way they could run, given what they have become.
Mm-hmm.
They ran as the party of war, and Kamala made it clear, lethal military. They ran as the party of the richest people.
Mm-hmm.
The Democratic Party is the party that contains the richest people that have ever existed in human history.
What did Barack Obama tell them? I'm the one standing between you, talking to the banksters. I'm the one standing between you and the people with the pitchforks.
Yeah, but they took over the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
The banksters,
mm-hmm.
The people in Silicon Valley, that alliance of Silicon Valley and Wall Street, and I guess we could throw Hollywood in there too.
Mm-hmm.
That is the party they've become, and they've treated their, and I put quotes, base, as though they really didn't count, that all you had to do was propagandize them, advertise to them. Kamala really humiliated Black folk with this idea that you have a political rally and it really becomes a hip hop concert
mm-hmm.
or something of that type. And the presumption was that Black people are so dumb that that's all you need to do to attract them. By the way, you're talking about the base of the Democratic Party and humiliating and so on your base. Nothing reflected it more than Barack Obama coming out this year,
mm-hmm.
pointing his finger at Black men.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do that.
Men.
Don't do it again, homeboy. Don't do it again. You of multi-million-dollar houses in all parts of the country, pointing your finger at poor Black men. Who are you? Who are you? And then your wife, Michelle, coming out, literally calling for a gender war within the Black community, that Black men need to be put in our place. That's the Democratic Party, and it should have lost. When you attack Black people and Black men, the poorest group in our society are Black children. And I think the next poorest group, and this is a close thing here, are Black men.
Mm-hmm.
The most in prison, the least educated, the poorest. You see it all over the urban landscape. And then you come to us and say, either you vote for Kamala Harris or you will be excoriated, you will be put down, you will be humiliated. I don't accept it. And the Democratic Party and Barack Obama are spent political forces. They are spent political forces. If I had nothing to celebrate on November 5th, it was to put him in his place and others like him in their places. And then out of the rubble and ruin of this party, we will create something new. But we're not on that plantation like you thought we were. And I think in cities like Philadelphia and Chicago, by the way, where you get poor Black people rising up against these Black political misleaders and crooks, by the way, and saying you might be my color, but you're not my kind. And Black folk, and this is what is not understood well, Black folk are making calculations based on their class position. And they're judging Black people, other Black people, Black elites, based upon their class interests. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And 2024, if we connect some dots, is not an isolated incident, because we saw the same thing play itself out in 2016 with Hillary Clinton, as she tried to roll out Barack Obama in Philly at the last moment, thinking that we were going to, as they say, like lemmings to the sea, even though I don't think lemmings actually do this, that we were going to follow him off the cliff. And when you look at who is Kamala Harris's primary teacher or mentor, Hillary Clinton.
Oh, yes.
It's Hillary Clinton. And so we look at what happened in 2024, replay of 2016. Why? Because you tore the page out of the Hillary Clinton playbook, and it failed again.
Well, they misunderstood 2020.
Okay.
They miscalculated. This is every ruling class.
But they never came to grips with understanding 2016.
Well, I agree with that. But they thought that 2020 negated or nullified 2016. And
they were wrong as the day is long.
Long as the day is
long. Go ahead.
But they miscalculated about themselves, the Democratic Party. They thought their, quote, star power, their celebrities, all of that. Come on. To me, it is hilarious. I mean, all of that. But now, it is though they have destroyed themselves. The people and their base, and I put a quote, their base has turned against them. The entire working class in its majority, they turned against the trade union leaders, all of them. And I'm still trying to find out what Sean Fain has to say these days.
What did Sean Fain say in January when he came out and endorsed Joe Biden? He said the leadership of the UAW is endorsing Biden, but the rank and file are going to vote their paychecks and support Donald Trump. Sean
I didn't know he said that. I thought
he said that he said it was like the endorsement, I'll say, was on the 16th or 17th of January, early in the day, and either at that same speech or a speech he gave that following evening, he said the leadership is backing Biden. The rank and file are going to vote their paychecks, and they're going to support Donald Trump.
And I feel that the inflation. I think he was addressing inflation at that time,
and the move to electric cars. The fact that they were fearful of losing jobs to mechanization and move towards electric cars.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, if he said that, I think that's a good thing. I was deeply unhappy with the whole trade union movement. The AFL-CIO just comes out immediately. How do you do that? Don't you have to vet this guy? Don't you have to consult the people who pay your salaries, i.e., the rank and file? In fact, the whole left, and this is a nebulous concept, the left. If Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama are the left, then I'm a kangaroo or something. I mean, come on, man.
Right.
They're the ruling class. Let's keep it 100. The people, and to the extent that the trade union leadership, what is sometimes called a labor aristocracy, and you look at some of their salaries and they are that, which has a tinge of social democracy to kind of soften what they really are. You all suffered an irreversible defeat at the hands of your own members and those who you have not sought to organize over these many years. You have dropped the ball. So now, and then don't even mention the blackness leadership class. You talking about the clown car and the circus train. I don't know anything good to say about them. Maybe you do, Will.
No, I don't. And to that point, let me ask the final question for you.
Go ahead.
I was expecting, with the defeat of the Democrats, that we would see greater support third party. And so do you see a rebuilding of the Democratic Party as the Democratic Party, or as the Democratic Party has lost the base of its support, does that base move to a third option?
That's a very important question. What happens if the two-party system, as we've known it, can no longer rule? The Republicans are split between the Trump Party and the Republican Party. The Democratic Party is split in I don't know how many different factions. Can the Democratic Party become a social democratic party? Well, I don't think so. Like that essay, that article in the New York Times, the Democratic Party brand is in the toilet, and they put it like that, and it is. They are not trusted. That's the first thing in politics, you need to be trusted. I think it's a spent force. I do not see any way for it to be rebuilt. Now, what fills the vacuum? Let us not take lightly that 25% of the American people say they would support using violence to change things. I am not one of them, just to keep it clear. But the people think that. What does it mean when Luigi Maggioni, who cold-bloodedly killed an executive of one of the richest corporations in the world, and he becomes a folk hero to young people?
And he's not poor. He's not without health care. He's not suffering in the least. No. He's from the, I'll just say elite to make a general. His family ain't hurting.
No. And he's not hurting.
Right.
But somehow the moral imperative overrides the material imperative. And history moves in strange ways. And we are in a historic moment. We're talking about the fate of this country. For me, the framework, the anchor to think about the future goes back to Martin Luther King and James Baldwin, by the way. Nowhere else. These smart people who teach in university. And by the way, I'm like this, Will. Forgive me. You might say I'm I don't know what you could call, but look, if you teach in a university, I got questions
Mm-hmm.
because what it took to keep a job in this academic setting
Mm-hmm.
means that so many compromises have been made. And of course, to have achieved meant you had to go through a lot that separated you from the people.
Mm-hmm.
I think King and Baldwin had it right. If we are like Baldwin said, if we are to achieve our country, it will require something almost heroic on the part of the American people. By the way, I've not given up on the American people.
No, we can't.
Well, there are a lot of people who have.
Oh, but we can't.
We can't, Will, because you're a father, I'm a grandfather. What I look like giving up?
There you go.
I got to fight for my peeps.
Right.
You understand? And that don't include the entire working class from which my parents come and I come.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we're fighting for. And there is, see that, but let me, I'm talking too much. I know I talk.
No, look, I brought you on to talk.
Okay. On Christmas Eve. But,
right.
Look, man, I think that if there's not a future in this country, a future where the visions of Martin Luther King, really of the black history,
mm-hmm.
unless we're to discount all of that, the Frederick Douglasses, the Sojourner Truths, I mean, our whole history, the vision of our people, of our music, of our art, if we are to concede all of that to the ruling class, if we no longer believe that Black people have what it takes to lead this country, and we do, if that is the case, get out of the way, hometown. Stop, just shut up. If you are a nihilist, if your worldview leads you to such deep pessimism that you're almost on the edge of suicide, stop talking.
Mm-hmm.
Please. What the people need is a creative and positive vision that is constructed, shaped out of a real engagement of ideas with the aspirations of ordinary people. And I'll just stop here. I think Chicago, like a lot of people say Chicago is the Midwest Philadelphia, and Philadelphia is the East Coast Chicago. That's
mm-hmm.
because of the music and so on, rhythm and blues and
right.
jazz. You understand?
Right.
I mean, we there's similarities there, but I think there are other similarities. Chicago is a wealthy city with a whole lot of poverty.
Right.
Philadelphia is the poorest of the 10 largest cities in the country. Will people passively accept anything the ruling class says? I don't think so. So I entered 2025 with a realistic and sober-minded attitude that the people are more engaged, more political than perhaps a long time,
mm-hmm.
maybe since the civil rights decade, that, like Gramsci said, we have experienced and are experiencing an interregnum where the old is dying or has died. We have to think and fight for the new.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Black intellectuals, the ones that still have some purpose in their lives, must help, not dictate,
mm-hmm.
not tell people what they have to think, must help people to see the future. And most people want a future.
Absolutely.
They're not suicidal.
Absolutely. Dr. Anthony Monteiro, Merry Christmas to you, my dear brother. Thank you on Christmas Eve, giving us this time, giving us this brilliance. Thank you. Greatly, greatly appreciate it.
I appreciate you, Will. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your audience. And I think that the future will be difficult, but I think there is
a way.
At the end of the rainbow, there's a future. Yes.
Thank you all so much for listening to the Connecting the Dots podcast with me, Dr. Wilmer Leon. Stay tuned. We will be off Christmas Day and Thursday. We'll be back on Friday. So new episode on Friday. Please follow and subscribe. We reached 5,000 subscribers. So if each of you were to reach out to 2 more people and encourage them to subscribe, we would be well on our way. Leave a review, share the show, follow us on social media. You can find all the links below in the show description. And remember that this is where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge, because talk without analysis is just chatter, and we don't chatter here on Connecting the Dots. See y'all Friday. Until then, I am Dr. Wilmer Leon. Have a blessed, peaceful holiday. Peace. I'm out.
Connecting the Dots with Dr. Wilmer Leon, where the analysis of politics, culture, and history converge.